Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be continuing our exploration of e4, e5, and we're going to be taking a look at an opening known as the Four Knights. And the Four Knights happens after knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, and we call this position the Four Knights. We're going to be doing 3 videos on this position. The first video is going to be focusing on the possibility of the move bishop c4. We're going to be looking at the Scotch Four Knights, and we're also going to be looking at what I like to call kind of an attempt at an improved version of the Scotch Four Knights. The second video, we're going to try to focus exclusively on what I consider the main line, which is the Rubinstein variation of the Four Knights. And then the third video, we're going to be focusing on what's known as the Belgrade Gambit, which is a very dangerous gambit in the Four Knights, and it's something that definitely deserves its own video. So after I complete all of these videos, we should have a complete repertoire. And if you click on my e4, e5 playlist, you should be able to access a complete repertoire at this point for the black pieces against e4 with the move 1, e5 once I finish these 3 videos for the Four Knights. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and please click on your notification icons. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the move bishop to c4. So bishop c4 is a move that's probably a little bit more common on the scholastic level and the club level, where the move bishop c4 is just kind of more of a mistake than anything else. Basically, what bishop c4 allows a trick known as the fork trick, and this is a very common trick used at the scholastic level. So the idea is knight takes e4, and we actually want white to go ahead and capture this knight. This capture actually favors us quite a bit. So after knight captures e4, we're going to break in the middle with d5, getting our piece back, but more importantly, we're going to end up with the only central pawn left standing. So an example would be bishop d3, takes. We're simply going to defend our central pawn with the move bishop to d6. So we're actually following a Grandmaster game here. The Grandmaster game that we're following is Wesley So versus Mamanjarov in St. Louis in 2018. So this is something that does still occasionally get tried on the Grandmaster level with the white pieces, but it's something that also has very limited success because apparently Grandmasters don't do very well either when they give up the center of the board. So here Mamanjarov castled, and it's also possible to play the move bishop to g4, and that might actually be interchangeable with castles. It probably would have transposed into the game. So after castles and then castles for black, rook e1, bishop g4, and now you can see why these moves probably would have just transposed. Wesley So played h3, and then we just kind of pulled this bishop back. And as you can see, Wesley So is obsessed with breaking this pin, but in so doing, he weakened his king side. And when your opponent has a better center, it's not usually a good idea to weaken your king side and give him some place to attack, because it's going to be very easy for black to transfer his pieces from one side of the board to the other. And that's just exactly what happened. Mamanjarov just immediately starts going after this king side and transferring all of his pieces over to the king side, including his knight, which makes it over there. And eventually, after this check and after the knight retreats, Wesley So had to resign because he's effectively getting mated. If he moves this knight, this queen and knight are coming in, or this queen, knight, and pawn are coming in. There's too much stuff coming in, and he's basically getting checkmated. And that was Wesley So versus Mamanjarov in St. Louis in 2018. So I'm going to mention it just because I know a lot of people here are going to mention it. And the thing that I know a lot of people are going to mention is, why are we playing knight takes e4 in this position? Why aren't we just leaving this knight here and doing something like, say, castles kingside, and allowing sort of a Stafford Gambit reversed? Because I know the Stafford Gambit is getting really popular. I'm not a big fan of the Stafford Gambit. I think the Stafford Gambit is kind of silly. But I know a lot of you are going to ask, why aren't we just playing like a Stafford Gambit reversed here? Now, I will mention that my personal preference is, I think the move castles kingside is probably a hair better than the move knight takes e4. I'm not a big fan of giving up the whole center of the board. But at the same time, this is kind of a nothing burger. After knight takes c3 and let's say d takes c3, sure, if black tries to hold on to this pawn on e5, maybe white can generate a lot of play in a very similar way that he would try to generate a lot of play in a Stafford gambit, especially since this knight is on c6 and we can't really play c6 and d5 to shut down this diagonal. So we're going to have this knight maybe coming to g5, we're going to have a queen coming to d5, maybe there's some things going on here. But black can just play really boring chess. Black can just say, okay, well, you can have that pawn back, I'll just play bishop e7, queen d5, we can just castle, and we can just give you this pawn. And this position is not only completely equal, it is completely boring in every possible way. So if black wants to, black can just equalize. And if you come across this, that's honestly what I would recommend. Just take on c3, and then just develop, give them the pawn on e5, and just equalize the position, and just play chess from here. Black has a very slightly better pawn structure than white, and the position is completely equal. So that's why, that's how we play against that. So the other thing that white can do in this position, of course, other than bishop c4, which again I said is kind of like a beginner's mistake, is white can try to play d4. And when he plays d4, that becomes what we call the Scotch Four knights. So what we do is we take, they take back, and now we have what we call the Scotch Four knights. So the move that's been known to equalize in this position for a really long time, and it's still the main line, and it always will be, is the move bishop to b4. We put pressure on the center of the board. We're preparing to castle kingside. And because of this pressure, white doesn't really have anything better than taking on c6. We take towards the middle of the board, and then white doesn't really have anything better than just defending his center. At this point, black has two moves that are played kind of equally. He can either play d5 or he can castle kingside. My personal preference is just to get my king out of the middle as quickly as possible, and then go ahead and play d5. And of course, we can transpose. We can get here through transposition as well. So ed5, cd5, and then we're going to have bishop g5, and then c6 to hold that nice solid center of the board. So here we have a position that is, in theory, approximately equal. This is just a level position according to theory. Each side has kind of its own set of advantages. What black has going for it is black has the slightly nicer center, and what white has going for him is white has the slightly nicer pawn structure. White has two pawn islands, two very clean pawn islands, versus black's three pawn islands, including one isolated pawn and one kind of semi-backwards pawn here on c6. I say semi-backwards because at least it's not on an open file. It's a backwards pawn, technically, but it's a very hard one to exploit. So black's pawn structure is slightly inferior to white's pawn structure, but black has better control of the middle of the board, and he also has the potential central passed pawn. So not even all the endgames are going to favor white. The minor piece endgames and the king and pawn endgames should certainly favor white. However, the rook and pawn endgames and the queen and pawn endgames should favor black because of that potential central passed pawn. So what we have in the end here is just a position that is relatively equal. And of course, the player that plays better and the player that understands these positions better is going to win. And the game we're following here is Nakamura versus Carlsen in Zurich in 2014. And that game continued knight a4, bishop d6, c3, rook e8, Carlsen just playing supernatural moves. After the bishop retreat, Carlsen was able to play the move bishop to g4, and then Nakamura played the move f3, and Carlsen just retreats this bishop back to the g6 square. He exchanges, and he just maintains his good central pieces and his good normal natural play, and he manages to turn this into an advantage and turns that advantage into attack against the white king. He keeps up the pressure against the white king, and after a series of exchanges, Nakamura ends up losing a piece and then resigning on move 40. And that was Nakamura versus Carlsen in Zurich in 2014. So that's roundabouts the way you should try to play that with the black pieces. Just do what Carlsen does, just play natural moves and just hang on to your center, and eventually you can turn that into some type of kingside attack, or whichever direction kind of white allows you to go. So going back to this d4, this is the Scotch Four knights, and it's kind of been known to be an equal position. So white has been trying to come up with something different that he can do in these positions, but maybe still try to play kind of a Scotch Four knights type position. And that's where this move comes in. And I'm going to date myself here. Back when this move first came out, this was called an SOS. This was like in the secrets of opening surprises. And this came out quite a long time ago. I don't even remember exactly how long. It was somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago. This move was kind of first discovered as an SOS, and it was relatively new back then. And it's a very clever move. The move is actually A3. And the idea behind this move is to prep d4. Because if you look at the other variation, the main problem that we had is we had this bishop to b4 move, which was considered kind of an equalizing move. And we didn't necessarily want to deal with that. So what this move does is says, hey, if black plays something passive, like if black plays bishop e7, we're going to go ahead and play d4, and then after ed4, knight d4, there's no bishop to b4, there's no equalizing move, so now we get to have our center and we get to keep it. So this is the advantage white all day long. So that's idea number one. Idea number two is if black plays the supernatural looking move, because normally black just develops his pieces freely in these kind of positions. If black plays the supernatural looking move, bishop to c5, hey, we've got the fork trick in reverse. We can play knight takes e5. And then after knight takes e5, we're going to take the whole center. And because the b4 square is being occupied, white's not just going to do that. White's going to viciously take the center with a move like f4. And then after, say, knight g6, white would viciously go after this middle of the board and end up with a huge advantage here because, black is uncastled and black doesn't have the space. Even if we change the retreat square for the knight, this is a little bit better for black than the other line, but it's still pretty bad. We just exchange, we gain the space with d5, and then after we stick our king on f2, we can exchange queens and then still end up being quite a bit worse in this position. This is somewhere between slight edge white to major advantage white. White has a huge space advantage, and it's just not clear exactly how black finishes his development. So we have to avoid both bishop to c5, and we have to avoid playing any kind of passive move in this position with bishop e7. So the move that I recommend is play the move that white could have played last move. When you're playing the black pieces, the onus to get an advantage isn't there. If you equalize with black, that's a good thing. So if the Scotch Four Knights is considered equal, we shouldn't have a problem playing the Scotch Four Knights in reverse, which is exactly what this is. So we're going to play d5, and then after e takes d5, knight takes d5, white can certainly play a Scotch Four Knights in reverse. And that's actually why I'm kind of a fan. I'm almost willing to play a3 because I've always kind of just preferred having the center versus having the slightly better pawn structure. But do keep in mind that these positions are considered equal according to theory. And after knight c3, bc3, a3 is not a useful tempo. So a3 is not a useful tempo, and therefore we've basically made a direct transposition into the Scotch Four Knights reverse. And again, these positions are supposed to be completely equal. So one example of how this could go well for black was in Molotov versus Karyakin in Moscow, Russia in 2014. That game continued bishop d6, and then white played d4. Again, if I was playing the white pieces, I would castle and then play d4. But, okay. So d4, we have takes, we have queen e2, queen e7. Black, of course, has no problem exchanging queens and then turning his structure advantage, he turns it into a kind of a two-bishop advantage. He has a piece correlation advantage now. So he's got a king in the center of the board, and he's got the bishop pair. And this position is probably just a little bit better for black from here on out. So after a few more moves, black manages to get his bishops to very aggressive squares. White does some weird stuff on the king side, which allows black to get these potential passed pawns over here, along with the bishop pair and along with the open file. So black slowly starts turning this into an ideal kind of endgame, and just white ends up pretty much dead at this point. The two passed pawns on the king side are next to impossible to stop, and he was unable to do so effectively. Even though he was able to create his own counter threats, he never had time to execute with c8, rook c8 here, because these pawns over here were going to be queening. So the game continued with g3. He brought the king back, trying to stop everything, but that, of course, gives up any hope of forcing this pawn through, and he had to resign, and that was Molotov versus Karyakin in Moscow, Russia in 2014. So that's really the move that I kind of recommend against that a3 move. We're going to play d5. So again, just to review, against a3 we're playing d5, against bishop to c4 we're going to be playing knight captures e4. And then the only other thing that you have to kind of worry about this in this position is if they play the move pawn to d4, in which case we're playing ed4, knight d4, bishop to b4 is equal. So in the next video, we are going to be covering the Rubinstein variation, and then in my final video on the four knights, which is going to be a three-part series, we're going to be looking at the very dangerous, very scary Belgrade gambit, which is after d4, e takes d4, the terrifying move, knight to d5, which is what we call the Belgrade Gambit, which is going to get its very own video. So tune in and watch those. And I hope that you liked this video, and I hope that you learned something new about chess. Thank you very much for watching.